So I'm going to ask our speakers to introduce themselves, if you guys don't mind, and just tell us a little bit about what you do. So whoever wants to start. It's
I'll
always
go
that
first.
awkward,
Yeah, I'll
like,
just
okay,
make
who's
myself do
going
it.
first?
Get it out of the way. So hello everyone. I am Owen Pudliner. I use he, him pronouns. I am with the Bradbury-Sullivan LGBT Community Center. We are a wonderful community space for the LGBTQ plus community here in the Greater Lehigh Valley. I am specifically the community health advocate here at the center.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. So my name is Veras. I am the violence prevention coordinator for the city of Allentown. Just to summarize, our goal is to really coordinate efforts to make sure all communities are safe and thriving.
Yeah. Thank you.
Winston Alozi, he, him, his. I am the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club of Bethlehem, working primarily with youth, not only in Bethlehem, but throughout the Lehigh Valley, ages 6 to 18.
And Panayota Papadopoulos, she, her, one of the training and education advocates here at Turning Point. So if you've come to one of these before, you've probably seen me a few times. But yeah, we're here for these guys. And I think the biggest piece of today's conversation, we were just talking about this before we started, just the importance of hearing from all diverse perspectives and how I could have probably an hour or more long conversation with each one of these guys about today's topic, but just the beauty of having that combined space. And really what we wanted for today's conversation to just focus on some of those like stereotypes. When I think of, and I think a lot of people, when we think of a survivor of domestic violence, domestic and intimate partner abuse, right? We typically think female, typically white, maybe of a lower socioeconomic status, probably young to mid adult age. Maybe there's kids involved, but a lot of times there's so many other people who are going through domestic and intimate partner abuse and that power and control dynamic within their partnership that we just don't often think about. So, what do you think are some of the common misconceptions, or what do you guys think of when you think of, like, am I the only one that kind of has that image in their mind?
No, I mean that's the topic of today's panel here is exactly one of the biggest misconceptions that you're speaking to. Abuse can happen to anyone, any gender, any age, any sexuality, and an abuser can be a person of any age, any gender, any sexuality, any disability, anything. Yeah.
When you when you think of the communities that you serve, because we're coming from a couple different angles, right? What do you think are some of those power and control dynamics that do show up within your communities? What do you see in the communities that you serve?
Cool. I guess there's always this idea that there are underlying factors for people to fall, I guess, into that abusive relationship. And as I was kind of thinking today, I was like, sometimes those abusive relationships create stressors for people that maybe didn't have any underlying factors that would lead them there, right? So I think that and it's something I've learned when I look at my community, I see people who are resilient, people who are strong, people who are really just doing the best they can to live and to thrive. And sometimes these relationships create those factors for them, right? Obviously, we speak about financial stressors, housing, things that they're dealing with. Um, but what I'm seeing is that there are people that are looking for a safe space. That's the way I see it. There's people that are looking for genuine relationships. And in that search of relationships, which we all are in life, they find themselves in spots that are like, this is not what I wanted, but I'm already here, right? So I think all of us at some point, we're all in that search, and that's what I see. That's what we see every day.
Yeah.
I'll piggyback on that. One of the things that I see in my work, and I think I've seen throughout my career, is how young people and particularly so the majority of the families that I serve are families of color. So over 80% of the youth that we serve are BIPOC, Black, Hispanic, multi-ethnic, of that vein. So this is coming from that, and mostly low income. So the income piece isn't a big piece, but it does play a part in what I'm going to say. I find that the power dynamic conversation is interesting when we talk about how it looks in context, the cultural relationship with power. When you are part of a group that has been marginalized, and the way that your group has worked through marginalization and has gotten access to upward mobility is by proximity to the predominant culture. There's kind of like a, what do we keep, what do we throw out? How close do we get? How close do we not get? How much do we adopt? How much do we not adopt? And that could be with many different aspects of different power structures, whether it's white supremacy, whether it's religious institution, educational systems, things of that nature. And I bring up those things because in and of itself, educational systems aren't bad. In and of itself, religious institutions aren't bad. But the ways that those systems may support ideologies that are harmful to folks, and therefore how the children of those populations are either ingrained in or they eschew those ideologies, plays a big role in how they interact with that power dynamic.
Yeah. You made an interesting point too, how a lot of times those, groups outside of the majority relate to themselves based on the majority instead of like creating a space for, that different perspective, that different, where you're coming from, that culture. It's almost like we're making space based on the majority instead of just creating that space for them.
Right.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. So, Owen, what do you see in the LGBT community as far as like unique barriers or things that maybe they experience?
Yeah, I was thinking these are all great ideas. As it relates to like trans and queer identities, there's just this smaller group of folks that you might be able to relate to in general. And we know from our health needs assessment that we do for our community every other year. Isolation, in general, like mental health issues are something that we all have a very good, intimate relationship with. And so, when you want to combat that isolation, you might seek out more folks that don't have your best interests at heart and put you in these precarious places. And then it also plays out in seeking support. Perhaps you don't have as many support structures in your family and your other friends' relationships. And there's a potential of like maybe you're not out to everyone. And so if you're disclosing these situations that you're in, you might be outing yourself. And how's that going to go? Is that going to reduce your support structure? Is that just going to place a burden on it? It can be a lot.
Yeah. One thing that I never thought about, but until somebody raised that kind of thought to me that, people in queer relationships, in any abusive relationship, a lot of times the question that people ask is, why don't you just leave? Right? And in queer relationships, especially, it can be so difficult because a lot of times your support system is also your abuser's support system because you have such a smaller, network of people who necessarily relate to that. So, the why don't you just leave question already is a difficult one, but add on top of that, well, if I leave, who is my support system now? Who do I go to? So yeah, I can imagine that in and of itself is like a huge barrier and obstacle. I want to talk a little bit about gender norms and just stereotypes that can make it really hard for individuals to feel heard. And I just want to preface this by saying the obvious, right? I am a white appearing woman talking to men about, male LGBTQ youth survivors. I was recently at an event where it was focused on men's health, and I was kind of asking a trivia question like, hey, what percentage of Black men do you think experience abuse? And it was so sad to me. The response was from this one individual said, as the perpetrator or as the survivor. And the fact that, like, he had to even ask that. I was asking, obviously, as the survivor, but the fact that the initial stereotype was, oh, we're automatically deemed the perpetrator. It just was like so sad in my mind. So yeah, how do you think gender norms kind of contribute to the barrier of people reporting and kind of reaching out for support?
Oof. That yeah, you know, that just has like a real special place in my heart because I remember working with youth in schools and teachers would have this kind of like stigma for these boys that would engage in these behaviors. Like these boys have the potential to become perpetrators. And I can assure you that every single boy in that room and speaking to them had experienced some form of abuse. And they could not vocalize, they couldn't put words to that abuse they experienced. So now they're acting out in different ways, and now we have a system that is labeling them. These are potential perpetrators. When these boys just wanted to be heard and wanted a safe space and said, hey, if I had the space to communicate, if I had the space to talk to somebody, if I had the space to just feel safe, maybe I would have not experienced that relationship, or maybe I would have left. Like they sounded like the vulnerability in that room was something that I was like, it brings so much grief as a facilitator because you're like, what can we do so that these young men can share their story? And I think that's the story for a lot of people who are marginalized out there, that they are literally walking around with suppressed stories that they just will never maybe get to share because the systems are not safe, the people around them are not safe. And then you have a culture that really speaks to this idea that men don't experience abuse, or they are strong enough to leave, or they have the character to endure. And you grow up as a kid hearing that, and now you're an adult. And now you wonder why now that adult is now struggling to vocalize and communicate and engage in healthy relationship when he's experienced a lifetime of be quiet, suppress, tough it out, you'll be okay. And there's so much grief in that even me as an adult, I'm still working through. I have a voice.
Mhm.
I can speak up, largely in part because of the systems that I've had to navigate, the experiences I've had. So I can only imagine people in that place and how they're navigating. So,
You know, Braley, I think what you encapsulated there speaks a lot of it, because when you've grown up in a system that says, well, and so let's go back. You grow up in a context that says, be a man, man up. You don't talk about that.
mhm,
Or this might be a little uncomfortable. Man, you should have liked it, man. Because there's been somebody's auntie has pushed up on a young man at a cookout or something before that was like,
mhm,
I'm 37. I look back 20 years ago, some things that were said to me like, this person's mom probably shouldn't have said that. That wasn't okay.
yeah,
You know, to a greater cultural context of a greater cult, not the predominant culture, but a greater cultural context of that's the man's lot in life, or it's well, it's you're supposed to be strong, and it's supposed to be, and aren't you manly that you're supposed to put up with whether it's physical hit, like, well, that's how you learn to be strong, that's how you learn to take a punch. Sexual abuse, well, that's how you be, that's your testosterone, or are you not in touch with yourself? There's so many layers of that there, that agency and that self agency and that learning of consent even starts with me. Like, who am I? Who's my identity?
Mhm.
So where does that go? And then to even go into permissions or safety, if you don't have a sense of self, or your sense of self is within the paradigm of, well, I exist in the context of my peers, or I exist in the context of the shadow of white supremacy or urban culture. Like, you don't have your own self. So to your point, you don't know that you have a voice. You don't
mhm,
think you have a voice. You don't think you have permission to use your voice, right? And so that's something like within our work at the Boys and Girls Club, we're trying to help with young people, because there are a lot of young people, young men, young women who are suffering, but they may not realize that what they're going through is not okay. And B, who can I talk to? Who can I say stuff to? who can be my safe space, my landing place, you know, and I don't feel judged, or that they'll understand me, which is not that this is a part of this, but Penny, I think that's why you had us. That's why representation matters, right? That's why it's important to have folks in these places and spaces that have an understanding of how things look in our world, because they've also had that lived experience as a queer person, as a Black person, as a Hispanic person, as a whatever other group that's not the majority culture. And I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. You might have to give me the
That's
signal.
okay.
Okay.
You're okay. That's literally the point of today, so it's okay. So we have a question in the chat. It says, yes, Mr. B and Winston. Of course, you can figure out who that is. How can providers build trust and create space for boys to be vulnerable? We've discussed how entering a room with labels or assumptions can quickly build walls. So what can we do differently? And I just want to throw in there that when we talk about creating space for boys, not just cisgender boys, but even transgender boys, right? How are we creating that space and not building those walls right from the start?
I think one of the things that helps is collaboration, and not even programmatic collaboration, but just being in those spaces where providers can speak with other providers and have these types of conversations, whether it's the directors, whether it's the program echelon of involvement, but just people talking about, these are the communities and the populations that we serve. These are the things that we know. These are our deficits. How are you guys doing it? What is your interaction during the pandemic and a little bit after? Our organization was having really good conversations with Bradbury-Sullivan, and then there were leadership changes and some leadership change, so we fell off. But it was good because for a long time we were one of those organizations. We don't see color, we don't see gender, we don't see sexual orientation. Meanwhile, I got Black queer kids coming in here all day. I need to see them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
I
fine.
know
Yeah,
when I was doing some prep for this, I might be a broken record at this point, but language, and what your first impression is such a important barrier to break down. Like, use that inclusive language, make the clear signals that this is going to be a space where, regardless of your gender identity, your gender expression, you're going to be welcome, you're going to be seen, you're going to be heard and respected. And that might be something as simple as what the name of the service is called, what the name of the building is called, what's present on any paperwork that a person might have to fill out. All of these things sort of can trickle down into the programmatic aspects as well, but it's going to be like that first impression is really going to do a lot of work, I believe.
yeah. I think for me, and obviously you're not involving yourself into the work, but I always say that, your your lived experience is such an important thing in this work. And not being able to make it about yourself, but being able to have that context of like our stories may not relate, but there are some aspects that you can like connect to, right? So when a boy says, "Hey, I feel alone," maybe you're not in this story, but we've also felt loneliness at some point, or I feel like I'm not, I'm in a relationship that's not working.
Yeah.
I've been in relationships that we're not going anywhere, right? So it's almost like coming in with like, where are my points of connection? Like, where can I connect with this group? And literally just like I've always said it, consistency, 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 and being genuine in the way you show up. Like the our community deserves that. I think like people, especially the young generation, like they can smell the BS. Like you're just here because you just have to be here. But they're also able to pick up when this person is showing up because they genuinely care about the work and they genuinely want to see me. Um, so- and that you see that like I've had boys that would be in the group the entire time and they're tough the entire time, and then the group leaves and then they stay behind. Hey, Mr. B, can I chat? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then they would cry. I'm like, in mid tier, I'm like, it's okay to cry, right? You don't have to, and you would hold space for them, and then you can literally see them. It's just like I remember he literally wiped his tears. He was like, "Give me a minute. I'm gonna be late to class. Give me a minute." he wiped his tears and like put on this like persona to like walk back into the hallways to see like make sure that nobody sees me that I'm crying.
Uh-huh.
And then every day I would like say like, hey, you good? Like, you okay? But those conversations after group, it's like he kept taking off the persona every session to the point where he became one of the most vulnerable students in that group. So our job is just to really model that vulnerability, and whether they come in there and they are cursing up a storm or they're like it, I don't care. Just show up. That's all that matters. I don't care how you show up, just be there.
Right.
And over time, like if we hold that space, like Owen said, and we are inclusive in our language, that is healing in itself. Like that is brings that healing in that room, and yeah. So I could talk about this like for a long time because like I feel like all of us in this space, like all of us, Owen and Winston, um, that we can really speak about this forever. So you may need to like check us because it's just it's
Well, this is
yeah.
this is again, this is the point of today. And there was a phrase I heard before that I really liked. We want to invite, not indict,
Mm.
especially for young boys. And just, not having that internalized shame and stigma, but like you said, just show up. Regardless of how you're showing up, just show up and just be there. This is not a question that I kind of prepped you guys for, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts of your own, just looking back on your childhood when you were younger, growing up. Who or what were the traits of the people that really made you feel safe? I'm really
Acceptance.
making you reflect on your on
Yeah,
your
yeah,
life right now.
Acceptance.
No pressure.
I know for me, because I was a young in my youth, especially my teenage years, I lived a way that was really difficult for me that I don't think I realized how difficult it was until I got a little older. Because I went to a school where most of my peers from my community did not
Oh,
all go to.
yeah, yeah,
And because of that, most of the kids were white kids from a more affluent section of town.
yep.
And all had relationships and knew each other and had known each other you know, since they were young. So not being from here, not being of the same culture, but, and my parents are from Nigeria. So also being a child of immigrants, like I had a whole bunch of I don't really fit in here, but having those adults, those safe places, those safe adults that like just were like radically accepting, like
Mm,
and because of that, like and because of that acceptance we're embracing. And it made me feel safe that I could like I'll just be authentically me. And it worked to this point, it's worked out. So, yeah. So acceptance I think is a trait in all of the different, and they were different adults, older middle-aged white women, young black men, Hispanic grandmas, the
the
ladies who did our
abuelas.
tailoring, yes,
Yeah.
abuelita, everybody, the Asian woman who did my mom's dry cleaning, like it was, and like I used to see her every week because my mom didn't want to go down there because she was raising the other kids, so she was like, a random adult in my life that I saw like every other week of my life that asked me how I was doing in school and told me to be good and do better and like made me feel special, you know, acceptance.
Yeah, Winston, that radical acceptance I truly like resonated with there. I know growing up, like I'm a trans man, so I was assigned female at birth. I grew up with that perspective. I was very much raised as like a people pleaser personality. And so, that intertwining in like just the lack of wanting to be vulnerable growing up. I felt most safe with some of my friends' parents were just so incredibly patient with me and just allowed me that space to warm up a little bit to just eventually get to a little bit of oh I do want this kind of pizza, and that's so silly, but it's just the building blocks of being able to like speak to what you actually need and what you need to feel heard.
I think for me, and I've been on this like vulnerability, transparency kind of thing now. But I think for me, like I remember being young and experiencing something and going to my friends, athletes and things like that. And like Winston said, like, hey, they kind of put you in a box. Like, man, that's not a bad like. So I remember one of the people in my life that to this day, like I hold them in such a place was my coach.
Hmm.
And I think what made him a safe space was that I remember the frustration of not being understood because there's nothing more frustrating than trying to talk through confusion and anger. You don't want to talk through that, but sometimes you feel like you have to because if you don't, then you're like neglecting yourself. And I remember going into the gym, and this man literally like put words to everything that I wanted to say, and just like, hey, you don't need to say anything. Like,
Yeah.
I got it, I understand, been there, A, B, and C, and there was such a like a relief in being able to just like rest and like who like somebody put words to like I didn't have those words and I'm hearing it. Um and for me like that's always been people that know me know that that's like that's safety for me. Being able to just like, hey, you got it, I understand. Like it's like going to Starbucks and the person like knows your order. Oh, really? I got you. Boom, 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 boom. Like, it's just such a relief. They save you time, they save you stress. Like, what
Yeah.
if we held that space for people that came into our offices and then like, hey, I get it. Like, I get the frustration. I know you dealt with this. You're good. Go take a walk. I got you. Don't need to talk. I understand. Like, that is like for me that I will never forget that comp. And it was a one time we kept talking like over time. Obviously, I was there, like it became a mentor, but that one conversation and that one time that person showed up set the foundation for that relationship to really for him to become a mentor for me. So yeah, that's my boy. That's my coach.
So I love I think there's so many like similar themes that keep resonating through, right? That acceptance, that patience, that authenticity, just being yourself. Even, Owen, like you said with the pizza example, like it's such a small thing, but it really is those little moments that, we accept. And on top of it, allow people to choose what they want. Like I always
Mhm.
tell people, there's the golden rule, like do unto others as you would want them to do for you. And I always tell people I hate that because like what I want, I might be a hugger. You might not be a hugger. If I come up and hug you, you're going to hate that. You know what I mean? So I think it's a matter of not just assuming what other people need, but having those conversations and or, like, hey, I can tell just by the way that you're standing, you do not want to hug me. And just like not forcing those conversations, but having those moments of just like, I got you, I hear you, I see you, you are not alone, essentially. And from a survivor perspective too, that empowerment, that peace, that ability to make the choice of how you want to show up in the relationship or leave or, whatever it is that you want to do, I think is super important. I could keep going. I don't know if you guys have any questions for yourselves. Obviously, there's so much more time, or if anyone else has any questions. But I kind of want to see if anyone wants to piggyback off of anything.
I know we were talking about gender norms before this last question, I
Yeah.
think. And I think that can be so much more exacerbated by issues of homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, self-assigning some amount of reduced masculinity and in turn self-worth, if you are the survivor of abuse, and just the idea of toxic masculinity. I get so mad when I think about the concept. It's done so much harm. And I really, I want to support our youth in like learning how to dismantle that. Just as a silly little aside, like I've worked a lot of different jobs, a lot of different types of industries, and I've worked in an industrial space. And I've literally seen men maim and injure themselves because they don't want to use PPE, protection equipment, like because they don't want, oh, I'm a man, I can just work through this. Like, bro, there's a literal vending machine that you don't have to put money into, and you can get cut resistant gloves, and this wouldn't have happened to you.
Right.
So just that, silly little aside, but then there's also the intersectionality again of transphobia, and when you are jumping through all these hoops, in society in your daily life, trying to be seen as the authentic self that you are, that toxic masculinity can really like be a huge negative feedback loop of trying to navigate. And so I just want all my transgender non-conforming folks, just you are you. However you present, you are you.
Oh God, that's awesome.
Owen, if I can ask this, or ask you to expand, if you feel comfortable expand upon this. I'm glad that you shared what you shared, because some of the things I've learned from some of my trans friends too is, am I doing it right? Am I showing up as the right kind of man? Am I showing up as the right kind of woman? Like, now is my being my authentic self. Now I got to be performative. Like, no, I just want to be me.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, it's I think it's really hard to navigate sometimes. Gender is such an incredibly weird, complicated topic, and when you're trying to unpack it for yourself and trying to put yourself in the world, and it's I'm 11 years or so past my coming out, and so I'm deeply um, I'm sure I still deal with stuff that comes up every now and again, but overall, like I feel very confident in myself. But I know that's not the case for people who are just coming out. Maybe people who don't work in this queer space. I'm so incredibly privileged to be in a LGBTQ plus community center where I can say whatever I want and I don't have to edit myself. People will understand where I'm coming from. Not everyone has that immense privilege, so I acknowledge that. But just really like unpacking. There's no one way to be trans. There's no one way to be a man. There's no one way to be anything. And so just really just doing the work to get comfortable in yourself, and that's going to be a lot easier when you have the patience and the consideration and compassion of your support services. So it all starts. It's all cyclical here.
And I think that's part of the problem too with why men specifically, but any, gender non-binary, etc., people who don't feel comfortable as survivors reaching out for support is because of these quote unquote labels that we feel like we have to be put into. Like, why do we feel a need to label and box and put everyone into this like clean cut whatever? Why can't we just be people experiencing and enjoying company with other people,
Mhm.
So I think also, I saw a thing that's that was talking about the state of American men. And Ecomundo did a study in 2023. I think they've done one every year since. But they were talking about how, like, young men especially are often turning to the internet to seek digital connection and guidance on how to become a good man, right? Based on those things, because they don't always, like, people don't always agree on what a good man looks like or what a man should be, right? And a lot of times they end up finding these communities online that speak to their identities, but then end up being in echo chambers that may or may not be harmful. But I don't know, I guess we can talk a little bit about the idea of mental health and how even that isolation, that those gender norms sort of put people into these boxes. That's not a clear question, sorry.
No, no, I think I get what you're saying. I we there was a time where the internet became like a hub, and there are a bunch of speakers out there that were talking a bunch of nonsense, and Owen spoke to the toxic masculinity and the way toxic masculinity was now kind of painted in a good light. Like it's just this power in that, like this power in being dominant and being controlling, all these things that are just abusive. Like they're just abusive behavior. So I think I struggled at times even with like debunking some of the things that they were hearing and some of the things that they would be doing and some of the things that they would be validating. So I spent a lot of time in those groups modeling, okay, I know you heard that, but this is how it's supposed to look like. This is how you handle conflict. This is how you handle conversation. I remember the first time in a group where obviously we use inclusive language, so people have partners, right? And I remember one boy saying, well, uh What if people have a boyfriend? I'm like, well, in the middle of the group, let's challenge that. What's wrong with that?
Mm.
What's the issue with that? What do you feel like we need to highlight that? Let's get to the root of that so that you learn to create safe spaces for other people and that this doesn't become an issue down the line. So it was also kind of tackling and challenging, and also kind of there were times where you have to really balance. Okay, I'm gonna be kind and
Mm.
hold the space for you, but I also need to hold you accountable because you're moving in society and you may cause harm to other people. And obviously there's a way to do that. But that was such a challenging time. And I owned it. I'm like, this is my job in here is to make sure that I model safety, that if I hear something that is not aligned and it's harmful, that I can address it in a safe way, but that they understand like, hey, that's not cool. And where do you learn that from? Or where are you hearing this from? Right. And if you trace it down the line, it's what's being discussed in other circles and the locker rooms and the hallways and like I wish
Swing
like
boys and
I just
yeah.
wish I had like a wand like a magic wand and I can just kind of like make everything kind of go away, but it's the work. Like how do we get to the root and really address, and sometimes it's those systems, like our systems prep like spread that messaging, like, and hopefully we get the chance, like I believe Owen, Winston, like we like, not to brag, but like, well, I'm gonna brag a little bit, but like
Humble brag, humble brag.
the work that we're doing is kind of sowing that seed in that next generation, but now they will be out there and they'll become the next generation that's gonna hold space for others. And but we gotta get comfortable also like holding that space and factoring in accountability for people as well.
Mm. So there's another comment in the chat that says men can respond in a dismissive manner when you call out their behavior and tell them, what if someone did that to your sister or mom? Right. And it's never like, what if someone did that to you? But anyway, how can we help young men recognize and accept that certain behaviors, norms are hurtful or toxic? Like, I think, Braley, what you were talking about, it's kind of like a compassionate accountability, right? Still being compassionate to the person and what they're going through, but also, holding them accountable. But how are there ways that you all, as adult males, like have, mastered the art of calling out your people? Do you just, I don't know.
So I'll say in my context, and I'll speak two ways. I'll speak as an organization, Boys and Girls Club, but then personally how I handle things on my own. So Boys and Girls Clubs has like curriculum that talks about that, like how to get folks to, first of all, be educated on why certain language or certain things, or, it's not just being PC, it's seeing people as a whole and understanding that we're not trying to cause harm, we're trying to, do good. And in the Boys and Girls Club context, build up and help give empower kids and enable and empower kids to become positive and productive and caring citizens in our society. That's part of our mission. Um, so giving them those tools, but like, what does that look like in real life? And yeah, you can sit through a class and you can have a really engaging, person who's teaching you, the facilitator is teaching you like, good language and seeing signs and seeing, so when you're in environments where this type of talk is appropriate, how do you become the disruptor? But I think in the real part of it is being relational. I work with kids 20 years. You can't just talk to anybody's kids any type of way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just the reality of it. So let me go back. You can do that, and your message will not be received, or it can cause more harm than good, or the lesson is lost. So what I have found is that there's a lot of it, and so like in the cultural context that I work with, people say things, or say graphic things, and with the kids that I work with, especially the teenage boys. So let's talk about why that's not okay, or well, why do you think that this is a bad thing? Do you know anybody? Well, I don't know anybody. Well, maybe my uncle. So let's talk. You know your uncle. So this is, sometimes you got to see that there's that, and then depending on it, I'm glad that you brought it up because it is important for all people, but especially young people, to see themselves in the construct.
Mhm.
You you have autonomy. You are a person. You know, what if you struggled with, with your sexuality? What if, you knew this is the way that you wanted to live and this is and your family was not supportive of it, and there's a myriad of things there, but imagine like it's an intrinsic part of your identity, like it's who you are, who you're born to be, and they're like, no, I don't like you because you have blue eyes, or you no blue eyes in my house, we don't believe in blue eyes, like that's 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 something that we have to talk with the kids in a compassion, but still not being afraid to disrupt behavior when we see it. So I think it's a fine line. But again, that comes through that building of rapport, building of relationship.
Yeah.
It's integral because you can't plant seeds in a garden that you've never been in.
Yep.
I like that.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Winston said, like the relationship piece is super important. They will dismiss. So even like in Jerome's comment, like when calling them out for their behavior, like you have to be able to have that rapport. And maybe it's not a call out. Maybe like you said, it's an invitation to come in and like be curious, like, hey, so let's explore that. Where's that coming from? And even like sometimes when kids respond in a defensive way, instead of taking that personal, is okay, was my approach effective? Did I have the relationship to even do that with them, or did I step in and become like the teachers like everybody else? Um, that takes time. Like there were boys that did not respond, and after a while, like I can call them to them side and say, hey, what's up with that? You can't do that. All right, Mr. B, I get it. But if I tried that at the beginning, they would probably like get on my face. Like, I don't know you, I don't know who you are. So it's being able to like,
Stop.
yeah, like, do I have the rapport to do this and not call them out, but invite them in and be curious about where that's coming from.
I think on the invitational aspect too, I think a lot of times it's almost like there are certain spaces where it's quote unquote acceptable for men or LGBTQ identities to work. And you don't often see a lot of men in, the survivor victim services, violence prevention. Like a lot of times it does tend to be more female focused. So is there a way that we can better engage men, LGBTQ community leaders, allies in that prevention, education, advocacy work? Is that even our focus? Do we work on engaging, or do we work on just being genuinely ourselves and the space will create itself? I don't know. I'm really pitching you all like these.
You sort of called it out already. Like, yeah, I
Come on,
mean,
guys.
are the resource providers themselves diverse? Are we seeing ourselves in those support services? And when we don't see that in support or leadership roles, like it's hard to really like feel comfortable in that space sometimes. And when it's such a vulnerable topic to be open about, what you've been through, that's just another hurdle to clear on top of something that's very difficult. And I think the focus in general, in my opinion, should just be better education holistically. And that's around healthy relationships. That's around consent and boundaries. And that should come from, not just romantic perspectives, but platonic and familial perspectives. And it'll help us dismantle those things, what we've grown up in, how we can support each other with just as humans and community members, to be an open ear and a steady shoulder, generally. I know, like I'm probably like pitching some sort of utopia, but let's have some better education and start that.
Yeah. No, Owen, you're right, and I was going to mention this earlier, but I didn't want to take up a lot of the airtime. But that education piece for the different organizations and the different providers, it all starts with the evaluation of who you are as a provider, whether you're an organization or you're your own educational institution or your own service institution or whatever. But folks that are working in the community, what inventory have you taken of who you are, right? So what does our organization actually do? And then this is our mission, and what is our mission? Does what we do line up with our mission? And then if what we does line up with our vision, how is this now being executed to the folks that we're serving, to the folks that we're providing our services to? And if there is dissonance there, we got to go back and deal with that. I'll tell you one of the things, because I work for an institution that is 95 years old. And part of our DNA, which is something that we had to change, part of our DNA is that although it was not our mission 95 years ago, it was intrinsic in what we did. We were the place where people were Americanized. And so you lost a lot of your individuality by coming through because you became amalgamated into the greater construct. And, 95 years ago, that's what everyone did. And there was a need for that service.
That's why you didn't see color or
that's exactly.
see whatever. Yeah.
No, we see American.
Right.
And you're going to become an American, Roberto, you're Bobby now. Okay, that. But what if Roberto wants to be Roberto? And so that is something I would say to kind of speak to that part of the question, and to tie in the last question too with the mental health piece. When organizations start to address their culture, and for those who work for larger organizations and institutions, especially within the past 6 years, there's been so much. We're DEI focused and we are open and affirming, and especially within the past year and a half, all of that went out the way. But if that's in your organizational DNA, you start to change things. So like here at the Boys and Girls Club, what we do now is our staff meetings, we have to reevaluate, what are we doing this for? Half of this can be an email. Like, it's no longer going to be Winston sharing, this is what you will do, this is what we don't do, da 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 da. Sometimes it's the forum for that, where we have to address some things where the whole group is together. But that's not it. It's become an educational piece. And when it's the educational piece, what are we educating? What are we doing? So like we got rid of icebreakers, and instead like we have conversations that go back to our mission. So every staff meeting that we have, there's an open discussion where we talk about what was life like for you as a kid? Who did you need as a kid? How are you showing up for kids? And then that kind of helps go into our educational pieces, that informational pieces, all of that stuff, all of that conversation. But we had to change some of our practices so that people could see the value in the changing and the shifting of the organization to meet needs as a service provider to those that we serve. Because we talk a lot about trauma, we talk a lot about adverse childhood experiences, but what good can you do as a provider when you're not in touch with your own, right? What good can you do when you're not in touch with what has happened to you, what has made you, why you're in it, if you're not in touch with your inner child, one of the things we don't talk about is in a lot of our mental, and I'm sorry, I'm gabbing again, but in the mental health field and in the youth services field particularly, there are a lot of folks who do this work and are driven to this work because things have happened to them. There has been harm. There has been those things. And some folks use it to avoid dealing with their childhood trauma or the traumas that they've experienced in life. And so this is their penance or pay it back. But there's still a level of the educational and the healing piece that needs to happen with us as the providers. So got to be in touch. So do the evaluation, inventory of your organization, try to change some of your cultural practices, and that then colors the lens in which you actually provide and facilitate in spaces.
You're like, just take that moment.
I'm soaking it up, yeah.
I think you're right, though. I think if it's part of the DNA of your organization and what you already do, it doesn't matter, what you label yourselves as or not. The label doesn't matter. It's the authenticity behind it. And, that just makes an absolute huge difference. And it's hard too, especially when that's not coming from top down. If it's a couple people in the agency, but I think you can still bottom up and still kind of provide that, just being real and being vulnerable and willing to be yourself. And that kind of allows others to let their light shine, as it were. So
going. I know I'm not in that role anymore, but when I was in the role as a child scene director, I had this phrase I would say, we got to bring a different swag to what we do, right? And that's just being on like holding safe space, being ourselves, being transparent. Also, like once I said, being able to do the work within yourself so that you can show up authentic and hold that space well. But I remember having a kid ask me like, "Hey, why do you do this? Like, why do you like why do you come here?"
Mm,
Um, and I think that at times, like those are questions that we have to ask ourselves, even as an agency, as people that are doing the work, as people that are just committed to, why am I doing this? Like, what's my why, right? Um, because when we have no why, like we're more liable to cause harm to others because we don't know, we're just showing up just to show up. But when our whys align as an organization, as an agency, as an individual showing up in the room, you understand that like every interaction is important. Everything matters. Like the way you show up in that room, the way you hold space, the eye contact you give, the words you use, and not to like you're not in hypervigilance of like, am I doing things right? But you're holding yourself like I need to show up because there's people that like I would they just navigated systems where they've been thrown away. Like I know what it's like to visit a welfare office, right? And know what that's like to see somebody in front of you doing an intake and okay, what's your name and whatever. Okay, next. Like, okay, like we've have experiences in those systems. So now I can't like repeat that for someone else. I can't be that teacher that they're always used to seeing. I can't be that system that they've always used to navigating. How do we do something differently? So for anybody that's listening out there, for the men that's listening, have conversations with other people with other perspectives. Like we put ourselves in a box and we think our world is just our world and it's we're just really small in the entire world. But talk to other people, talk to other experiences, like really immerse yourself so that you can become a better we become better people in society when we just know more and we can hold space for others. So yeah, just lean into that. Like really just be open to new things.
I feel like I have 87 more questions that I want to ask this group
Part,
just because
part two.
it's honestly, but I just want to, I guess, end on one. Before I do, I'm just going to mention, just statistic wise, that over 1 in 4 men have reported experiencing physical abuse, sexual abuse, or stalking. Almost 2/3 of male survivors reported that they were first victimized before age 25. 1 in 5 were first victimized before age 18. 1 in 5. And compared with cisgender, transgender individuals were more than 2 times more likely to experience physical and sexual intimate partner abuse. And that violence, unfortunately, against transgender individuals often starts earlier in life. I will also add that bisexual men and women experience higher rates of abuse than any other sexual identity group. So, just keeping that in mind with everything that we have talked about as far as survivors. But if you, with everything that you've seen, if you could implement one policy or program tomorrow, if you could wave a magic wand, like Owen was saying, I'm envisioning a utopia, but sometimes we have to envision those utopias to, have goals to work towards. So if you could implement one policy or program tomorrow, what would it be?
Yeah, man, these questions are good.
I try.
Whoa.
I knew my audience. I knew I had a good group.
I am going to speak like to the moment right now in that we are seeing funding being cut for organizations like ours. And so what I would love to see is for that to be tossed out the window and for not only funding be maintained, but perhaps even
Senora,
yeah.
Yeah.
your typing is cutting him out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
But yeah, these services that we all provide, they're vital lifelines in our communities. So we can't afford for our communities to not have these important things in their circles. And then just again, the education aspect, I want to see that starting as early as possible at age appropriate discussions. That's that's my input there.
Sorry to cut you out with my typing.
I think if I could wave a magic wand, something I would want to see is more familiar conversations, because a lot of it comes back to what happens in the home. So one of the things I see with the young people that I work with, particularly my LGBTQ kids, is that for some of them, they can be as queer as they want to be at home, but you can't be that outside. Or for my young men who are going through situations that have been inappropriate for them. Well, we'll talk about it here, but we don't deal with it there. If we have those conversations at home and providing parents and families with the tools to say, these are how we address. I'm going to be, and forgive me for those who this might be triggering. If you know, you are a parent of a teen boy, we need to talk about sexual assault. And if they're in athletics, how, coaches and athletic trainers are sometimes in that list of perpetrators, but also uncles and close family members and family friends, and not all are male. I just happen to list some male, but like you as a parent, as a mom, need to start seeing those signs, and it's important because a lot of times when it comes to young boys, there's been a culture of, and with good reason, we need to bring in the community to help, and we need to give our kids to the community to help. But who is the community? Do we know the community? Do we know the signs of grooming? Do we know? And a lot of the providers, a lot of us institutions are now getting that. We not had are getting those trainings and stuff. But does the average parent, does the average family know? Because some of that stuff culturally looks fine. Like I don't come to nobody's house empty-handed, and especially if you got kids, I'm coming with candy. But if I'm only giving little Dominic candy every time, and I said, don't ever tell mommy, and it only happens in our special place, somebody should realize that that's not okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, obviously funding, and I agree with Owen and Winston. I would love to see a radical transformation in having our society be like a trauma-informed world. Like if I can, I don't know if I can put a policy into that, but where we are able to see people as they show up and what's the context behind that and be like accepting, and it ties into everything: education, how we show up, how we hold space for others. But if there's a policy that, hey, we're gonna assess for trauma informed instead of assessing for policies that go against views that are aligned with a certain, politics, we're gonna assess for, are you holding safe spaces? Like, are you holding safe space for people? Do people feel welcome? And I have an idea, but I'm not gonna say it because then I don't want nobody to steal it. And then that's
After
even,
this, we
yeah,
can collaborate or something.
I'm gonna keep it that one. But yeah, just a trauma informed lens from a trauma informed political government, trauma informed systems, trauma informed communities, like where people are just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know it's hard to pick one thing and wave a magic wand, but no, I just want to say I appreciate all of you so much for today's conversation. On your screen, if you're still with us, please fill out the survey if you get a chance. The link is in the chat. There will also be a certificate of attendance in that survey to access, and I'll send it in a follow-up email as well. And I also wanted to put some resources. So here are all of the places where everyone works: the Allentown Health Bureau with Braley, Bradbury-Sullivan Center and Owen, Bethlehem Boys and Girls Club with Winston, and then your national hotlines as well as our hotline if you ever need us. But thank you guys so much for this conversation. Like I said, this was, I could always talk more, and, hopefully we continue these conversations as we go. It's just the start, right? We don't ever end the conversation. We kind of continue with the work that we do after we leave. So, but thank you guys so much, and I hope everyone has a great day and stay safe.